Welcome to the first panel, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Munich. I only came here once before. I came to the third one, and based on my experience so far, it's always a hot, sunny day on the day of the Munich Cybersecurity Conference. So the sun's beating down. I have every sympathy for the guys in the sunshine over there. 2 years ago when I was here in my capacity as the Director General of Digital Europe, which is the tech industry association, and I'd also had the privilege of leading a European Commission policy forum on the digital transformation of Europe's industry and enterprise. A fantastic forum brought together many brilliant people, and of course cybersecurity was very much on the agenda then, as it remains on the agenda today. Now I spend time, I'm in that delightful phase of my career where I can do a series of things, and one of the things I'm doing is as a global tech advisor to a communications company, Burson, Cohn & Wolfe, which is a merger of two of the many WPP communications companies, Burson Marsteller and Cohn & Wolfe. And one of our clients is Telstra, the Australian telecommunications company. This is relevant to our panel this afternoon. They're just about to produce a report. It'll come out at the end of this month. Looking at digital transformation on a global basis. And they've surveyed, I think, over 3,800 individuals in a dozen or so markets and 14, I think, geographies. And two things emerged from that. One that is very relevant for today is that the protection of digital assets is very high on the agenda of everyone undergoing digital transformation. You'd sort of think that would be the case, wouldn't you? But it's reassuring that that comes out in the survey. But the other thing that's relevant to our panel and our discussion this afternoon is that this survey looked at digital transformation through 4 different lenses, if you will. It looked at it through the lens of process. It looked at it through the lens of technology. How well do people understand the technology? It looked at it very importantly through the lens of process. And finally, through the lens of people. And in a way, I think that's the way the panels have been organised during this conference this afternoon. And we have the privilege of organising and talking about that first topic, the last in my list, of people. So I can sit down, not turn my back now to my panellists. Now, I am joined by 5 great panelists who are all going to make a really good contribution to this. And we're going to begin, we'll try anyway, to focus on people in 3 groups: staff, users or customers as the second group, and bad actors as the third group. Now, there's clearly some overlap between those 3 different groups, but and in fact, it was brought home to me recently with some other work we'd been doing with Santander. Actually, we'd been looking at the perpetrating of data breaches in the banking sector globally in 2017. And this was a piece of work that I think IBM had done. And I was quite surprised to find that of those data breaches, only 42% were due to outsiders, only 5% were due to malicious or bad actors, and over half were inadvertent insiders. So it's very relevant that we're talking over half. I mean, that's staggering. So it's very relevant that we're talking about staff as the first of those people. Now, let me introduce the panelists to you. So starting on my right, Larry Clinton. Now, Larry, if you read his intro, it says he literally wrote the book on cyber risk management. I think you've got some copies of the book with you, haven't you, Larry? The Cyber Risk Management Handbook, published by the National Association of Corporate Directors and endorsed by the US government. And last year, in conjunction with BSI here in Germany, you produced the German edition of the handbook as well. So it's great to have you on the panel too. Motohiro Tsuchiya, I hope I pronounced that correctly, is a professor at the Keio University Graduate School of Media and Governance in Japan, but he's also been the deputy director of the university's Global Research Institute since 2016. You've done more than written the book. I think you've written about 30 books. This guy's written on intelligence and national security, cyber terror, cyber security, and international relations. So we won't carry on through the sort of competing on number of books, Kirsten, at this point. Kirsten's already had a brief introduction. She's the managing director of the Cyber Readiness Institute, and it brings together senior leaders of global companies, so big companies coming together to help small companies, small and medium-sized companies, improve their cybersecurity. And your creds, Kirsten, very impressive, was formerly the executive director of the US Presidential Commission on Enhancing National Cybersecurity. So a lot of experience to bring to our panel. On my immediate left, Stefan Miklitz is the engineering director at Google here in Munich, responsible for privacy and identity. And you manage engineering teams who provide, I mean, a lot of engineers in your teams, I think, provide users and staff with the tools to control and manage their privacy. And I know you also help with the development of the Google products as well. But last but by no means least, who's actually going to kick us off in this discussion is Stefan Luders. Now, Stefan, I think you've got a brilliant job, Stefan. It's very impressive. He's the Computer Security Officer at CERN, which, as you know, is the European Organization for Particle Physics based in Switzerland. 2,500 staff, so that's a pretty good start, you know, for our discussion. But interestingly also, when I counted 17,500 scientists around the world, maybe more now, involved in CERN's research. We're clearly all going to have their fingers in your system somehow. And we want to start with Stefan on this issue of on staff, because Stefan, when we were having a pre-discussion, you were actually quite vocal about the quality of the people that were joining you and their ability to cope with the demands on them to help us protect our digital assets. So get the ball rolling, Stefan, if you would.
No offense there. I didn't want to offend anybody, but just from coming back to cybersecurity, risk is proportionate to the threat, to the probability of having vulnerabilities, and to the probability of consequences. I don't control the threat part, so I don't train attackers. But I'm doing the defense, so I have to bear the consequences. We're running lots and lots of different digital systems, like Airbus is doing. And the problem I'm facing, we're engaging with students. We're hiring lots and lots of people coming from all over the world, working at CERN for master thesis or for bachelor thesis for short moment, doing development on control systems or on software developments. And what I see is that those students basically not coming with a cybersecurity mindset. We get web designers. They know brilliantly how to set a web page, web server, but they don't know how to do it securely. Database administrators don't know how to do it securely. So I was looking, why is that? And in many, many curriculums of universities, maybe not of some of the professors which are here, but many universities don't teach this. For your bachelor, you're doing operating systems, programming, databases, web servers. And if you ask about security, no, this comes later for the master. And I think this is utterly wrong. Having a security conference is utterly wrong, actually, because I've never seen a functionality conference or a maintainability conference or an availability conference, a functionality conference. This is not existing. Why is security different? For me, and this is why to start is, those students should get an education when they learn to program securely. If they learn setting a web server, to set a web server securely, setting up databases securely, virtualization in a secure fashion. And what I see is the students I'm hiring, the students CERN is hiring, usually they don't come with such a background. And we're not talking about cybersecurity since yesterday. We're talking about this since, at least I do, since 2003. And I wonder, why is that?
Why? Is that because, Stefan, you are at Google employing all the best people who've got the cybersecurity skills, and there's nothing left for anyone else? No. Well, how do you find it?
Well, you wish, right? I mean, it's certainly true that we have a number of security experts on the staff, and we have a huge team that cares about security, not only for our users, which is mostly what my team is doing, but also internally. But then again, right, we have a lot of staff, and we have a lot of people from different backgrounds. What I think is universally true is that people understand the importance of security, especially on the staff. But that doesn't actually save you at all, right? Because everybody can get phished, and that includes all of the experts here in this room, right? Phishing attacks are increasingly getting sophisticated to a level where I think nobody here would be able to distinguish. So we have to be aware that everybody on the staff and everybody handling our systems, and there's many, could be, or every account could be under attacker control. So we have to defend against that as well, which is a very big part of our.
And do you find the same thing as Stefan, that the people joining you are basically immature in their skills?
I wouldn't say that. No.
You wouldn't?
I think I would disagree on that in a sense that they might not know all the things that they need to do, but they are certainly aware of it. And they, if given the resources, they are willing to find out.
And let me turn to Larry next, if I may. So you've been running this program for a number of years. You've written a handbook. Why have you not fixed this, Larry?
We're doing our best. One of the reasons I like to speak to European audiences, sometimes more than American audiences, is you folks are classically trained. So I think we should go back to Marcus Aurelius, who says, of all things, you must find the essence of it. And the essence of the problem in cybersecurity is not vulnerabilities. Technology is just how cyber attacks occur. For us to get to the essence of this, we need to understand why the attacks occur. And the core problem is economic. The economic balance in cybersecurity is attacks are cheap to acquire, easy to operate, very profitable. You have a great business model. And on the other hand, the defenders were defending an inherently vulnerable system. We're always one step down to the attacker. They have first mover advantage, and we have virtually no law enforcement.
Yeah, but Larry, I'm going to
By
interrupt you. That's the bad. Those are the bad guys. What about the 50% of inadvertent?
No. This is the point. Is that we're asking the wrong questions. We need to change the paradigm. The reason we don't have enough, and they probably all go to Google, but the reason we don't have enough sophisticated people in this space is because nobody teaches security in the universities. But why? It's because nobody wants to pay for security. So I'm guessing virtually everybody in this room has a smartphone. Be honest now. How many of you asked about the security when you bought your smartphone? There are always 3 or 4 liars. There are always 3 or 4 liars in every group. We don't want to, and by the way, the government doesn't want to pay for security either. One of my companies had laptops for a defense system put in, and the government came to them and said, hey, these are insecure. And the company said, no problem, we can secure them, cost you the $2 a laptop. Government said, no, thank you. So laptops going into security. The reason we need to change the paradigm is that we are not talking about the economics. They don't teach secure coding because nobody wants to buy secure coders. They want, what do we want? We want apps, we want cheap, we want fast, what do we want? We want fix my internet, get my internet to be faster. Until we reformulate the economics of this issue, we are going to be nibbling around the edges. If you want, I've got a whole book on the cyber social contract. We need to fundamentally rethink the relationship between industry and government with respect to our economics, just the way Hegel and Locke and Hume rethought the relationship between the citizen and government a couple of hundred years ago. And by the way, just the way you guys managed your situation after World War II for hundreds of years, Western Europe has been ravaged by almost constant warfare. 2 horrible world wars in the last century. For the last 75 years, virtually total peace and prosperity. Did you solve that problem by resolving all of the vulnerabilities at the borders? Or did you get to the essence of it and realize you needed to work together? You're at essence all Europeans. You needed to erect new models with new ways of interacting, and entities that thought of themselves as competitors for years needed to start to work together. When you did that, you got 75 years of world peace. Government and industry need to do that now. All these wonderful partnership programs, I'm involved with a lot of, we're nibbling around the edges. And they're not real partnerships. Not the way Google does a partnership with a company. You're going to partnership where you sit down and you talk about the economics and make sure it's profitable for both. That doesn't happen with industry government talks. That's the reason.
Kirsten, you've worked on both sides of this partnership, potential partnership, government and industry. Do you agree with Larry? Say no, please say no. Makes it more
I'll say no
interesting.
just for-
Yeah.
It's getting hot in here.
Yeah, getting hot.
I'll just
Yeah.
say no. But I want to step back from what Larry's saying a little bit, and that happens a lot. We go back and forth on this. So one of the things that you're talking about when you talk about the human, you referenced the commission that I worked on, and one of the key issues that we discussed in that commission was moving security away from the end user or educating the end user. And what you'll hopefully all think to yourself is, well, those are not necessarily in conflict. They can be reconciled. But there is this feeling when you talk to technology people, it's, just get the humans out of the loop. Well, that is ideal, but we don't live in the avatar world. Humans are going to be in this world, and humans do interact. So we've got to think about what do we need to do to educate the end user. And I would look at that in two environments, and one of which will align with what Larry's saying, and I'll just disagree with him at some point just to make it feel better for you, John, as we go through this.
Thanks.
But the first is we look at organizations. We have to educate our workforce. We have to educate the workforce on the basic elements, phishing, authentication, those elements where humans have direct interaction. And I really push back on the term cyber workforce. Certainly we have specialties that require engineering, math, and science. But really, each of us are part of the cyber workforce. And if we don't push that responsibility and that accountability to every individual, we're truly missing out on the opportunity to educate. The second piece of this is as you look at the organizations, we're also talking about society. So oftentimes in the United States, but it happens around the world, when you hear a breach, what you then hear the news stories coming out around are the individual saying, well, what if I was breached? What if they got my information? What are they going to do with it? What do I do now? And I would argue that that's actually not the question or the right time for the question. We as individuals, and this is about educating the culture and the society, we need to be asking those questions beforehand. We need to be asking about the security before we reserve a room at a hotel, before we purchase a car, before we fly an airline. Because as long as we don't make security a differentiator, to Larry's point, companies won't make it a differentiator. We as consumers have to start making it a differentiator. We tend to think of humans as a liability when we think about security, but humans can also be an asset. An educated workforce, an educated society is an asset. And to Larry's point about who asked the question about their iPhones, I traded in my iPhone last summer. And the engineer, the technician, as he was switching it out, was going through all the security preferences. He was just clicking and clicking and clicking. And I said, wait a second, what are you clicking? He was actually making the preferences for me. And I stepped back and I said, here is a great opportunity to educate an entire society. How many of us have Samsungs, have Apples, purchase them? When you are looking and you go to a store and they start clicking through for you, what an opportunity, because to Larry's point, we all hold a smartphone, for an individual to be able to be educated on this. So the point is, we have to be looking at security as a differentiator, not just in our society, but in organizations. And as leaders, and we talked about the boards earlier, top down, bottom up, we need to be requiring that accountability and that responsibility from all employees and from all citizens.
And Masahiro, we're often, I think, criticised correctly in European conferences for having a bit of a European-US love-in, and we don't often get the Asian perspective. So it's great that you're here this afternoon. Should we learn anything else from Asian perspectives? We often feel that you're sort of more I can't imagine that story of going into the Apple store and the operator clicking through the options for you. Would that happen? Would that happen in Japan?
Okay, thanks so much. So thank you for inviting me. So I'm teaching cybersecurity policy or strategy in my university. So I'm helping the Japanese government to formulate a cybersecurity policy. And the government people are very, very frustrated with me and university professors because you are not teaching good students at Japanese universities. Why? So I always say it's too late to educate 20 years old students. So I want to talk about the North Korean experience. Because Russia or Iran might be your enemy, possible enemies, but so China, North Korea are our possible enemies in cyberspace, actually. So in North Korea, so the government is picking up elementary school pupils, maybe less than 10 years old. And if they find a good student in mathematics, so they will pick it up, pick her up. And so those students are transferred into Pyongyang, and so their families are living in a very gorgeous apartment, and so they are educated in a very talented universities universities later. So North Korea has 3 universities for computer science, and we counted a possible graduates number, so it could be 7,000 now. But 7,000 IT employees cannot be hired in North Korea. So what happens? So if you prove that you are very loyal to the North Korean leadership, they will be sent to foreign countries, China, Malaysia, and friendly countries. So they run a IT business. And sometimes they get an order from Pyongyang, so they start hacking. So those kind of system is working in North Korea, and they're educating very talented people from the less than 10 years old. We cannot emulate that kind of system in Japan. So as you said, so people are not happy with the security business because they cannot be rich. So you have to maintain 100% security in your business. So if you cannot do that, you will be blamed. So why? So why we were breached? So why get cyber attacks? Those kind of things happen. So they were very frustrated. They don't want to go to business. They want to go to IT.com business for money. So cybersecurity is not a good business in Japan. But in North Korea, you can be have a good life for cybersecurity. So that's why they are very positive to seek talents, technologies in North Korea. That's very different. We cannot emulate it.
But as we know, the North Korean, well, the whole structure is so completely different. I mean, what can we learn about what we should do differently from the experiences that you've seen in China, Japan, or South Korea, North Korea? What could we do differently? What could we do differently in our universities or before, as you put it, to fix Stefan's problem?
I'm spending a lot of years to educate young people, but most talented young Japanese people are hired by Google.
See, I was right, Stefan, I was right. Yeah.
We have a suggestion, and I agree with you completely. We if you're waiting to, till they get to Google or to CERN, it's far too late. We need to make cybersecurity cool. We need to make it so people want to go into cybersecurity. One of the things we're advocating is we should be accessing the gaming community. We've got hundreds of thousands of kids, including a bunch of women, which we don't have enough of, who are engaging in these games. Why don't we leverage that? Why don't we go after that and try to work with the gaming community to build cybersecurity into the games and then go to them when they're 8, 9, 10, 11 and say, you can make your whole living doing this kind of thing. It's cool. And advertise, and put up attractive models. We have one of my members is the Center for Audit Quality, who has a similar problem to cybersecurity. Everybody thinks
The Center for what, sorry?
Audit quality.
Okay.
These are the auditors. They have a
Okay.
real problem getting people to want to be auditors because it looks really boring. And so what they've done is they've done an advertising program where they get really attractive, cool-looking, good-looking people to be their spokespeople, and little kids look at them and say, oh, yeah, I want to be like that. I mean, we're supposed to be good at marketing, but we do not market cybersecurity. We should be marketing at a young age.
Yeah, very good. Kirsten.
I think it happens even before we have to market it. I think this is about a culture, right? And excuse me, jet lag.
Yeah, quite.
When we look at our students and when we look at what we're doing right now in the schools, we are giving children iPads in first grade to teach them how to read. We're giving them Chromebooks to teach them how to write, to do math. There is no reason why when they get that, they shouldn't be educated on what it means. I think that goes to Stefan's point. When we talk about creating a culture, it is very difficult. The same way it is difficult to bolt on security to a product at the end, it's extremely difficult to bolt on security to a mindset. We all know from languages, if you learn a language when you're born and you can learn 2 or 3 very easily at a young age, it's a lot more difficult to learn that second language when you're 30, 35, 40. It actually exponentially increases by 10 years. When we think about in the United States, recycling and composting, those are the kids right now that are teaching the adults because they're learning it in school. It has been a part of how they're learning and how they've been raised. when we think about cybersecurity, where our responsibility lies is teaching our children at a very young age. We've already made the decision to bring the technology into the classrooms. There's absolutely no reason why we shouldn't be bringing the security into the classrooms. The point that was raised earlier, though, was how do you get the teachers to be trained to teach them that? I think that's a very important issue, and we need to be focusing on that. But there is basic cyber hygiene that continues to be the source of so much vulnerability across industry that actually could be taught to a first grader about authentication and what it means to be secure and what you do when you log on and log off, that we're still trying to teach adults. And I think that that elementary education piece is what's been very missing in most societies and cultures.
I don't want to do us out of a possible repeat appearance at next year's conference, but maybe you should have some school children as a panel talking about their attitudes. No, I am serious. I'm not.
You should drop the dress code. I needed to get a suit for here. I have a Think Geek T-shirt with me, and I wanted to come with the jeans, and I see business code, business whatever, not business casual. So thank you very much. Yeah, but anyhow, I don't
Next
care.
time would be fine. Do you have any thoughts on teaching kids early?
Not
anything else?
necessarily teaching kids, but generally, I want to come back to thinking about like our users and like, as we are talking about humans, right? Like it's certainly very, very true that we need to invest in educating people, and then early on, I agree with that, right? About cyber hygiene, about the important elements that they need to know. I think it's also important that we give them the tools and the products so that they can actually do that in a reasonable way, right? One of the things that we've been developing in my group is what we call the security checkup. And we are seeing that like 700 million users per year are actually doing that, right? And we are going through this like 3 to 5 minute thing to actually check on their security preferences, right? And the idea there is not that you have to be an expert to actually adjust all of these settings, but we are giving you kind of a hand in this. We're saying like, we think this is better for you, and this is the choice that you should be making, and this is the choice that you should not be making, and we think this is insecure, right? And I think we can do a lot more to actually help out our users so that it's part of the system too, right? It's not on the user and on cyber hygiene only, but it also needs to be in the design of the system.
Well, I forget who it was. Might have been Julian mentioned the Internet of Things and the growing. I think it was Alexander mentioned the need to have security by design built in. Even more important now that we've got, all sorts of devices attached. I mean, how would you feel that we should do that? I mean, the stories of people having their security setting the passwords of 0000 or 1234 on devices attached to the Internet of Things. I mean, what should we do in order to get that culture out into the wider community of Internet of Things suppliers and devices?
So I think, as I said, right, I think we can do a number of technological steps as well to make people aware of weak passwords, things that are kind of bad hygiene, right? Getting that out into a wider community of suppliers. I think that requires an effort all across the industry, right? To basically sync on what is kind of the standard that we want to have for passwords all across, right? We are living in a world where most of the breaches that we are seeing are coming from things like collection 1, right? Databases of username password dumps, right? That is still the source of most of the breaches that we are seeing. For our users' accounts is password dumps where the same password was used all across, right? And I think we can actually get rid of that by making people aware of that, and also by having a standard of like what it should be for an account in any kind of scenario.
I mean, we said we'd talk about staff and then users, and so it's good we've got onto users. I mean, I'm interested in this point about not putting too big a burden on the users, and it ties back to your point. I mean, the sort of economic cost of you could also think in terms of the hassle cost being an economic factor. If we say if you want to be secure, it's going to take you 10 minutes before you load up, or get going. I mean, how do we deal with this issue of making it easy to be secure as well as secure by design?
First
If
of
you
all,
can.
I agree with some of the statements. I think we should start with the pupils, with the kids. Where I don't agree what you've done in the Apple shop with the iPhone, I think they just got the defaults wrong. So we have to convince Apple to get the defaults right from the very beginning. But what I still wonder, You mentioned awareness raising. I'm doing awareness raising, training and in-depth training and posters and videos and online courses and games and serious gaming and so on. Why do I have to bear the cost? Why do I have to bear the cost to teach this to adults? Why are the kids not learning this? And if you remember this risk equation, there's also the vulnerability part. There are 2 products worldwide, and this is not from me, somebody said it somewhere, where I'm as the end user, I'm using Internet of Things device and all the things we're buying, everything digital. Why do I need to bear the cost for security? There's a second product. So why on software and hardware security I have to pay and not the producer? And where's the second product? Drugs. So this doesn't work together. So I'm wondering, where are the governments? I don't need to have certification because this is just one-time thing. Where are the governments starting with enforcing bug bounty programs? So I don't know whether you're running bug bounty programs, but I think government should enforce this. And I tell you why, for the financial incentive. And there might be a long discussion on this. Here's my proposal. You oblige companies who are producing hardware or software to pay $100 if I find a cross-site scripting vulnerability in that one. 1,000 for SQL injection, 10,000 for. You just fix it by a catalog. And the owner of the software has to pay to the first finder. So now the company has a choice. Invest the money in paying me, fine. Invest the money in the third-party company doing security for them, or investing in their own processes. And of course, it's not $100, it's proportional to the distribution of the software. And for open source, and that's the bad news, is government needs to jump in. So for open source, government has to pay. But I think this would give all the script kiddies, all the youngsters who would like to do security, an incentive, because cash counts. It will even give some of the script kiddies a chance to not sell on the black market, but come into the legal world.
Well, what's your thoughts about this then, Larry? Because it does seem to me you said people don't want to pay for security. And if you followed that model, the software would just cost more, wouldn't it? Because they'd have to build it.
So I haven't analyzed that model. It's an interesting idea. I'd like to think about it. But what I can tell you is we have thought a lot about incentives. And different incentives will work for different groups. You know, and I think more at an industrial level rather than a consumer level. But for example, and what we advocate is what we need to do is rebalance the economic model so that it is in the organization's best interest, profit motive, to build security in. So let's take IoT for an example. It's a big problem. And the model is, by the way, we have incentives throughout the economy in all sorts of different areas that we haven't applied to cybersecurity. For example, in pharmaceuticals, at least in the US. In pharmaceuticals, if you have a good track record with regard to the safety of your drugs, you get access to a fast track method for patent approval. This is incredibly valuable. You know, getting quickly to market is really important, and you're just on the fast track. It's not like you get through automatically, but you get to go first in line. Why don't we give first in line to people? Why don't we have a similar sort of model for IoT devices, where if you have a good security record, you get a fast track with your next product coming by. Now we've got the companies wanting to maintain this. We could do the same in regulated industries with audits. If you know any of these industries that can't stand audits, they're expensive, they're boring, they're blah, 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 blah. They hate them, you know, and they're really expensive. And a lot of times you have to do almost constant auditing. How about if you get a really good audit? You don't have to do one the next year or the next quarter or whatever. Then you've got an incentive to keep up that really good security record, because you don't want to go back into the old system where you're doing audits quarterly as opposed to annually. And these I'm just offering as models, you know, without going into kind of the details back and forth. But I think that there are all sorts in agriculture, aviation, ground transport, pharmaceuticals, defense, even in security. The Safety Act should be applied better to cyber, that we can just take and apply to cybersecurity. But our field is so young, we haven't done that yet.
Thank you,
that
Larry.
will alter the model.
Masahiro, you wanted to come in.
So because I'm a political scientist, I don't believe in economic models at all, actually. So, but
Right.
so.
Economists don't believe in
Okay. So one thing I want to take is a reputation cost. That's important. So if you lose a face in cybersecurity, so companies, people are very, very frustrated. So losing a face is a very important factor. But so cyber hygiene, I don't believe it in, because it's very difficult. So these are people who care security here in this room. But I believe more than 20% of people do not wash in your hands in restaurant. I'm always watching people in security conferences. So people do not wash hands. So it's a basic hygiene, but people don't care. So that's the important thing. So
Okay.
you can name it. Oh, you didn't wash your hands. That's a reputation cost. That's the most important thing.
Okay. Kirsten, don't eat the peanuts.
That's a hard to follow up. I think one of the things we also have to appreciate is we talk as if there's nothing happening, and there's clearly a lot happening. And I know we're going to hear from Terry Halverson later from Samsung. I mean, look at the products that are out there that are doing this well. There are products that are out there that are taking a look at this. What we haven't done well is cut across the IoT space. I think one of the interesting pieces, and we heard this earlier, that we're talking about digital security for critical infrastructure, and we talk about data. Data is our most critical asset right now, and data is held on everybody's device. Everybody holds critical data in their own way. We have to be thinking about how to secure that data, and also, as we're looking at these interdependencies, recognizing that we don't draw the line at critical infrastructure. Interdependencies, IoT, mean that our critical infrastructure is linked to that which is not critical. And so when we look across our culture, when we look across security, we have to do a better job at looking at, as Alexander was talking earlier, whole of government, whole of culture, whole of commerce, because we're trying to secure the digital economy, which is an intersection of industry, government, nonprofit, academia, all these other elements. And we've got to be looking at that without distinguishing and differentiating our own models for security, because it all requires a baseline level in order to raise the bar for security across the board.
I'm going to, if it's okay with you, because we started a little bit late, I will aim to finish at 22, which gives us just over a little over 15 minutes. Hope that's okay. And I promised the panel that this audience was a really engaged audience with great questions, and I'd like to give you the opportunity to maybe make a few of those points. So if you've got some questions or points you want to make, let me know. But just before we do that, Masahiro, when we were talking earlier in preparation for this panel, you referred to the cyber warriors of China and North Korea. Now, you've hinted a little bit about how North Korea goes about the cyber warriors. And so thinking about that third group of people, the bad actors, what insights can you give us into the cyber warriors among the bad guys that we might not know about?
Yeah, I'm running a CJK Track 2 conference, so China, Japan, Korea Track 2, so scholars dialogue. But we learned that people say, so cyber attacks coming from China, but there are 5 types of people in China. So first, frustrated young people. So they graduate from the Beijing University or Tsinghua University, but they cannot get a job. So they are very frustrated. So they are having fun to attack foreign countries. The second is economic spies. But actually, so the Chinese are fighting with the Chinese. Chinese companies are fighting with Chinese. They are stealing information a lot. And so we are foreign governments, foreign companies are also victims. The third is political spies. So spies under the Ministry of State Security, they never stop cyber espionage. So they are just using cyber technologies in addition to existing technologies. And fourth is PLA, so People Liberation Army. So but they are not using the final card yet. So they are preparing for a future war. And finally, so the mercenary soldiers, they can be hired by anyone. So they do not care any victims, they do not care any employers. So it's very difficult to distinguish these 5 types of people. So we do not say it's coming from China or Chinese person or Chinese company. It's quite difficult to differentiate these types of people.
In as much as you can or are able to reveal, I mean, are you taking any particular steps to defend against the bad actors? I mean, is this the sort of intelligence that you might be deploying, as much as you're prepared to say? I mean, are bad actors on the rise? Is it something that's becoming more important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're not talking about details, but it's obviously, and there has always been an arms race. And one of the things that we are definitely seeing is the sophistication of the attacks is growing, and it's growing drastically. And I hinted at that. It's not only for like very special targets, but it's also growing all across, right? I said like everybody here in this room can get phished, right? Phishing attacks are growing massively. In Gmail, we block about 10 million emails per minute that are not reaching the inbox. But as the sophistication level is growing, right, there is messages that are very, very hard, even with machine learning technology and everything that we have, to defend against. So the sophistication level is something that we are seeing is clearly on the rise, and that is hard work that we have to do here.
And when you're not tearing your hair out about the students, I see you've done quite a good job on that, by the way. When you're not tearing your hair out about the students, do you spend a lot of your time worrying about really bad actors?
If I worry, then of course I worry. So we are permanently under attack like everybody else in this room. And we're just following this marathon. The problem with marathon is you don't know how long it will take you and what the path is. So we're trying to adapt again and again and again. We've seen the whole spectrum. We see script kiddies and the white hats, which are just poking our systems. We're training even students poking our systems. And then you got cyber criminals, phishing. WannaCry has been mentioned before, but we have seen up to nation states attacking us for one or the other reasons. And you have to see now, it's the arms race, how much money do we have to defend? And where do we have to stop? And also you have to accept that CERN is welcoming every year 15,000 scientists from every country from this world. Students, professors, physicists, engineers, secretaries, technicians.
From all over the world?
From all over the world, any country, and I'm saying literally any country. Maybe not North Korea, but all the others. So I can't do any background checks on those people. This is technically impossible for me. And even in the academic world, it's not appreciated doing this. So I have already certain people on site, just by statistics, who might have an evil intent against my organization. So this is something I have to face. So this is where physical and cyber then meets. And this is the harder nut I'm facing. Remotely, it has to go in somewhere. If you're on certain site, you get much more possibilities.
So I hope you think that has been a valuable discussion, ladies and gentlemen, and got the first panel off to a good start. You will all take different things away from it. A few random things I took away from it. 5 types of bad guys in China. I mean, it could be anywhere else, but I mean, I think that's quite a good categorization. I've always liked the idea of incentives of one form or another, not necessarily financial, ever since I read the book about Nudge, about how to change people's behavior by using the appropriate incentives. It's not just about regulation, despite what we might think here very commonly in Europe. It's not just about financial incentives, there are other incentives too. But really, most of all, I took away from it, get rid of your ties, stop wearing dark suits, and let's try and make it cool. So that's us out of a job. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, John.
Thank you very much. Thank you.